Hello, this is Tor from IDCOM. I'd like to discuss what kind of reliability and maintenance training our managers need in our plants, mines, and mills. As a starting point, I think it's important that they understand what good reliability and maintenance looks like. So we take a look at this slide. We can see the basic work processes for reliability maintenance. One thing is that we need to prevent failures from happening. It's one of the key things that managers need to understand how that is done. The second thing, well, several things in this chain, but we call it the chain of inspect, plan, schedule, and execute. That chain, as we typically say, you've seen in many of our videos here, that chain can't be broken. So manager needs to be trained and understand how to inspect, plan, schedule, and execute. So a couple more pieces to that we're coming back to towards the end of this video. But let's start looking at the prevent side. Do your managers know how to prevent failures from happening? I just want to take you out in a couple of plants we've been visiting over the years and take a look where we can see whether managers understand the concept of, let's start with the prevent piece here. So let's take a look at this picture here. We see oil cans that are covered with the rags and gloves, etc., etc. So somebody understands that we don't want to have dirt in these, but of course the rags and the gloves is not really going to prevent the dirt from entering to these oil canisters, right? So here we see, you can discuss whether it's craft skills or management skills, but the managers are obviously accepting this. So I'm going to assume in this case the managers just don't know. It could be that they don't care, but let's hope not. Let's just say they don't know. So in this case we see that managers don't really know how to prevent. And managers need to understand to actually manage maintenance that this is not good, right? Let's take another basic example around what a manager should know. Here we see a motor base, right? And we see a number of shims. I count about 7, I think. That's way too many shims. We know a manager needs to know that if you have 7 shims underneath a foot of a motor, you're going to have soft foot. This is not good alignment. And what else do we see? We see there's no push bolts or jacking bolts to be able to align the motor, right? So we almost see the beat marks here. So they're actually trying to align this motor with a sledgehammer. So just by looking at this motor, I'm going to assume that the managers in this plant really don't know anything about how to prevent failures. So these are kind of the basics that all the managers, in my opinion, need to understand. At least the basics of it. And it could be different for different types of managers, right? And depending on your role, how much you need to understand and how deep knowledge needs to be. But if we see these things in the plant, we're going to have to assume that managers really don't know. That was just a couple examples on the prevent. Let's go back to this slide here. We say inspect, plan, schedule. So let's look at the chain. Inspect, plan, schedule, and execute. I'm just going to show you a couple more examples here. So here we see a typical belt guard, right? It's completely covered. If management understand basic preventive maintenance and inspection techniques, any manager walking by that would say that's not correct. That guard should not look like that because I can't inspect it. At least not I can't inspect it on the run while it's running, right? So the management principle here is to inspect it on the shutdown, I assume. However, my guess is that that inspection on the shutdown probably never happens because we don't have time in the shutdowns to do belt inspections. So that belt is probably never inspected other than we see it smoking or we hear noise from it, right? So if we walk around this plant and we saw a guard looking something like this, we understand that managers understand basic inspection techniques. They understand that a guard should look like that with matte black wire mesh, so we can actually take a stroboscope to it and inspect the belt on the run. So we move that inspection from the shutdown to on the run because we understand inspection techniques. So that's the first step in that chain, inspect, plan, schedule, execute, just a sign for if managers understand this or not. So of course, if you go to a plant, your guards will look something like this, where you have all the guards wire mesh so we can inspect them and we move all those shutdown inspections to on the run, right? Let's take the next step. The next step in that chain was planning, right? So how do we see if we have planning? Well, of course, you can go talk to the planner and see what they're doing. But some simple signs, here's a storeroom. And outside the storeroom, we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys waiting for parts. This is right after the morning break around 9:30. So everybody just had a coffee break and now they're going looking for parts. Just from this picture here, we can see that this plant don't really know or understand what good planning is, right? Because they don't have the parts. So the craftspeople had to go find their own parts, after the break, or if it's supervisors or the planner themselves, they go get these parts. We need to teach people what good looks like. So in an organized situation, we may see something like this. Here's parts kitted and ready for delivery for the next day in the storeroom. Each crate has their parts and is ready to go, right? This is where we can see that managers understand that we have set up the right work processes, enabling people to do the right things. If we just take an example around the execution we can discuss whether it's craft skills or if it's management skills, and they both have to be there. But I really believe, or we here at IDCON really believe, that the management skills has to come first, and the work processes has to be implemented so that people can use their craft skills. So this is around execution, but here we see that management in this mill actually accept this kind of condition. It's kind of hard to see in the picture perhaps, but this is an actual pump, and you see there's a hose coming from the top here, cooling. I assume that they cool in that pump, probably the bearing. So I'm guessing the bearing was hot, so somebody said, oh, we need to cool this bearing. So we take cool the outer ring of that bearing, right? And what happens when we cool the outer ring of a bearing? Well, the outer ring is going to shrink, of course, because it gets cooler, and it's going to put even more heat into that bearing. But just a condition that we accept, and you can say this didn't happen yesterday, and that's why I took this as an example, because we can see this has been around for a while. And as managers, we walk by this and we accept it. So somebody managing maintenance and reliability needs to understand that this is not acceptable, right? Another basic example here, what managers need to understand. They need to understand basic physics, right? What do we see in this picture? We see dissimilar metals. If you put two different metals together, you get something called galvanic corrosion. We all learned in 9th grade or something like that in physics, right? And you see the bolts here to the right, they're fine because they have a higher grade than the actual valve. And then you see to the left here, you see the bolts are all corroded. There are two different materials there, and it causes galvanic corrosion. So these are some examples. This is one reason, there's another video around this, why operations shouldn't manage maintenance. Because if you see signs like this in a plant, we obviously have quite a bit of trouble, right? An operations manager, I don't think we can expect he or she should know all these things around maintenance. And these are just a few examples, right? So we need a maintenance manager to manage maintenance, in my opinion. Now, if you look at this what kind of training are we talking about then, to summarize this? Well, prevent, inspect in this chain as you see here. Preventive maintenance, essential care, condition monitoring, as we call it here at IDCON. Definitely need to have an understanding how to document PMs, what good PMs look like, what is needed, right? The planning and scheduling piece, work management, shutdown on the run. That's the second training that all managers have pretty reasonable good knowledge about. Execution, what does precision maintenance look like? How do we actually install things? How do we actually repair things to high quality? You have to have some understanding what that looks like. And I added two more boxes here because they typically come afterwards, but analyze and improve, meaning root cause failure analysis. You need to understand how to solve problems. There's another thing that I think most maintenance managers and operations managers need to understand a bit about in stores management. Not necessarily how to stock parts and how to put them in the storeroom, have to do a little bit about that too, but how many of each part should we have on hand and not. That's also an important part. So spare parts, basic spare parts management from a reliability perspective. So how would we do this kind of training for managers? Well, I would start with having clear workflows, because when you do this, is just an example, but if you have a workflow, the green boxes you see here are tasks, the black boxes are inputs and outputs, but then you have these little hats, those are roles. And if we go through a workflow and how we manage work in our organization, you can also clarify who does what in that workflow. So you can actually turn this workflow around and say, a planner, what are all the tasks a planner should do? And once we understand that, we get a job description. And from all those tasks, we can also see, well, if we have all these tasks to do, what are the skills that this person needs? So in the end of the day, you get some type of matrix like this, right? I mean, it may be hard to read here. I apologize for that if that's the case. I'd be happy to send you an example of this. But here, up top here is different modules. So I just took the top one here in blue is planning and scheduling. And then you see supervisors, planner, maintenance coordinator, reliability engineer, and it's a short and long class in each one of these. So you can say, okay, what are the training we need around planning and scheduling by each role? Same thing, next one is, I think that's preventive maintenance, right? So what does a supervisor need? What does an operations manager need, et cetera, right? So I hope that gives you some ideas around how to kind of build your training for your managers. Sometimes we forget, we always talk about skills training for our craftspeople, but unless your managers understand how to implement these work processes, you're never going to be really successful with having skilled craftspeople and utilize those people. I hope you enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to us if you can, and feel free to check out our website, www.idcon.com. There's a lot of articles and some of the videos there too, as well as on this YouTube channel. Thanks for listening.